Hello, Tad. A huge welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's so good to have you back. I've been thinking about you quite a bit just recently because going back, I don't know, it was a year ago. It was some time ago that you and I did the episode all about point of view marketing. Maybe longer than a year ago. Since I've kind of like pretty much anyone that I've spoken to that could do with point of view marketing, I've sent them your way. And so it's ended up being a conversation I'm in a lot with our clients, because often they'll kind of either downloaded your ebook or done one of your courses, and then we kind of fold it into the work that we're doing with them. And we've finally got to the place where we should be doing our rebrand in the next few weeks. And so I've been really in the depths of our own point of view. And all I can say is the more time I spend with that, my focus being on that, the more firstly, how obsessed I am. I literally probably to the point where I could co-teach point of view with you at this point. I'm so obsessed with it. But also just the level of appreciation I have for it. I honestly think it is absolutely genius. Such a profound, it's more than just a kind of way of marketing. It really feels like it's something really soulful. Something really soulful and powerful. And so I just wanted to say that, even though that's not what the conversation is about today, I just really wanted to say that at the outset, because I've been, mentally thanking you so much over the last year and then the last couple of months in particular.
You're welcome.
No. So it started by embarrassing you. We're now going to talk about, I guess, one of your other, it's obviously all aligned, but your other great passions is around niching. And before we go there, we were just having a chat before we started recording about the fact that, of course, the last couple of years have been very strange, uncertain, challenging times. And then right now it feels like we're kind of entering another phase of that. And how that can create for many, particularly in the kind of more like spiritual space, this sense of like, is it okay for me to be marketing right now? Is this tone deaf? Is this icky? And so before we actually went into the conversation that we're planning to have around niches, we felt that maybe to sort of touch there first in terms of what you've seen around maybe that sense of like uncertainty. Is it okay for me to be marketing in times like these?
Okay. So sometimes it's good to ask the same questions different ways, because the new version brings more lucidity to it. So here's the question I put to everyone, because it's an understandable question. The last 2 years have been very weird, and it just keeps getting weirder and more tragic as we go. And no matter what side of the the COVID fence you're sitting on, it's hard not to see the consequences that the lockdowns have had. I think particularly of communities that are already marginalized, single mothers. Dear God, your life was hard enough before, and now you've got the impact on the mental well-being of so many people, the masks, all the damn masks being littered everywhere, and the on and on. So it's properly reorganized most people's lives. People who are doing in-person work now have to do everything online and are a little cagey about even trying to do in-person work lest lockdowns come again. And then we've got what's happening in Ukraine as of this recording, and who knows what the next, conflict and atrocity will be. And there's all sorts of other atrocities that don't get the press, that affect other people's lives, even if it's not shown on CNN. And I think there is this general feeling of things unraveling at an increasing pace. So in the face of all of this and everything else that I didn't mention that I probably should have, how can we market into that? And as you said, doesn't it seem tone deaf? Doesn't it seem, I don't know, maybe selfish or missing the mark, not of service to the times? So let's rephrase the question. Is it okay for you to have a place to live and food to eat during a time like this? When the world's in crisis, when your community's in crisis, when all of the whole social order is being ripped right down the middle, in the middle of all of this, is it okay for you to eat and have food? When other people don't have food to eat, is it okay for you to eat? When other people don't have a place to live, is it okay for you to have a place to live? I mean, these are not simple questions. I'm not asking them as if there's a simple answer,
Mm,
but um, let's just assume that it's okay to have some food and to have a warm place to live, and that us having that, at least to a certain extent, I don't know if you live in a mansion and you waste a lot of food, maybe that's a different thing, but at the basic level, this, we shouldn't be trying to lower the bar. We should be trying to raise, the standard of living of everyone up to people's needs are met.
mm,
And that's a whole immense conversation about what does this mean, what are our needs, but I'm talking about a fairly modest level. Yeah, it's okay. Now, how how much money is it? Well, it probably depends per, per family. Do you have a family? Are you on your own? Um, there's all this conversation about a minimum wage, and there should probably be one about a maximum wage at some point. But so if it's okay to eat and have food and maybe do a few fun things in this modern society, that takes money. And that money, for those listening, most is going to come from your business. And the money for your business is going to be generated by marketing. So, if it's okay to eat, if it's okay to have a place to live, if it's okay to have your needs met, that's going to happen through marketing. So then there's just a question of, are you okay with marketing as a thing and as a vehicle to meet your needs, since it's not going to be, I mean, if we lived in a village and there were hunters and people growing the food, and crafters making things for us, and it happened on a gift economy, and I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful? I think a lot of us probably crave that kind of life, and it's just not here in the moment. Some people opt out, but there's that. So that's just number one. Number two, when we're talking about point of view marketing, to me, the genius of point of view marketing, not that I feel like I necessarily, I probably coined the phrase, but it's not something that people weren't doing before I named it. So
I think named it, and I would also say, and I know that you absolutely do credit the people that you've sort of influenced and taken piece of, but I do feel that there's something you've done very powerfully in terms of creating a kind of framework and a sort of journey through that.
sure.
I think I can't let you just say you've named it, Tad, quite honestly. It's just a bit too humble.
Well, I'll just say that the genius, when I see people market in that way, the genius in it is that people see themselves in it.
Yes.
If somebody lays out a map, the genius of any, you go to a mall and there's always that dot. You are here. So you know where you are. You can locate yourself in the map. And so point of view marketing, when it's done really well, people can see themselves in it, where they are, where they're not, what they've got handled, what they don't have handled. And that's a real blessing, because I suppose the opposite of point of view marketing is gaslighting. And gaslighting is where the thing you're being told is different from what you're seeing. It's another way to say it is it's, in the Bible, they talk about thou shalt not bear false witness. And because bearing false witness has immense consequences, one of them is to the psyches of everybody who's on the receiving end of it, because you have to now decide what to trust. Do you trust your senses, or do you trust what you're being told? I mean, George Orwell had a lot to say about this in 1984, but it was basically people were instructed not to trust their senses. They were instructed to trust what Big Brother told them. And Stephen Jenkinson, who had the privilege of studying with, he wrote a book called Die Wise, and he did a lot of work in the death trade. And one of the questions he would get from people, let's say the people's parents were dying, and they say, should I bring the kid in, the grandkid basically, to see this? And he would say, well, why wouldn't you? Well, because it might be traumatizing to see their grandfather dying. And he said, it's not that it's traumatizing, it's just different. They see the change. The traumatizing part is for them to be sitting there at the deathbed of this old man or old woman who they've known their whole life. Suddenly their eyes so much bigger because their face has shrunk, their hands so much bigger because their arms have shrunk, diminished, gaunt, not present like they have been, and to look around at their family and see no mark of that change, see everyone pretending that it's normal and it's fine and nothing's different. That's traumatizing, because then that 6-year-old has to decide who to trust. So it's a big deal, this bearing of false witness. And I am talking about marketing, and I will get there. I haven't completely lost the thread at all, but there's this word heft. Did we talk about that in our
You
conversation?
did, yes. I remember because you were talking about
Yeah.
the meaning of it, which,
Right.
yeah, I'm not going
So
to
people,
try and remember exactly, but yeah,
no,
you did.
so folks can go back and watch that interview to hear it. But basically, it's important that our marketing has some heft to it. But that heft comes from an accurate rendering of what's happening on the territory at the time. And if people can't see the times and the places they're in reflected in your marketing, it feels less and less relevant. They don't see themselves in it. It's a very strange thing to go on Instagram. And I don't understand the geopolitics of the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, and the only thing I know is that I don't trust what CNN tells us about just about anything. And that's number one. And number two is that innocent people are the ones to suffer. There's the old Tommy Sands song, There Were Roses, about the conflict in Northern Ireland, but the last line of it is, and those who give the orders are not the ones to die. It's Bell and O'Malley and the likes of you and I. So that's all I know. But to have this conflict happening, this this war, incursion, invasion, whatever you want to call it, and then it's all over the news, and then you go to Instagram and people are just doing their marketing as if nothing's changed. There's nothing on the Instagram feed that acknowledges what's happening in the world. And when you see that as a pattern, it's clearly it's set on an auto queue, and it just goes out at these times, and they scheduled it months ago. There's something maybe untrustworthy about it. Not that people have to be speaking to the events, but if what's being talked about in the marketing doesn't in some ways relate to what's happening in the world of the people involved, it's hard to find oneself in it. It's like you go to the mall, but there's a map of Texas there instead of the mall, and you're looking for some direction in it. You're looking for, where am I? Can this map help me? And it doesn't. So this idea that wisdom is generic and transportable and the same from place to place, and what's true here is true there, and what was true at this time is going to be true at that time, bears some real scrutiny. For example, there are certain, I don't know, seminars, workshops in the personal growth space, certain philosophies that say you've created everything. You've attracted everything in your life. You're 100% responsible for your life. Then there's, the activist scene and the sociology that says, no, 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 no. You're not really responsible for anything. It's actually a much bigger story that you're in. You're on the receiving end of most of it. Who knows if we even have free will? It may all be determined. And, there's systemic oppression and all that. So those seem to be saying completely the opposite thing. This question of responsibility. Are we responsible or aren't we? And if you bang your head trying to figure out what's true, are we responsible or aren't we, you don't get anywhere except some kind of fundamentalism that's incredibly rigid. Because the thing we know is that there are friends of ours who've gone through those workshops that you're responsible for everything, and it made their lives better, and it made their community better. It helped. It's impossible to deny. They cleaned things up with their ex and their parents and their kids, and they started a project in the community that's made a real difference because they went through those workshops. But we also know that people have gone through maybe an anti-racism training, and it brought them immense peace and relief. Just because you're a person of color, there's nothing inherent in that means you understand the level of oppression that your people have faced. You don't necessarily know the history. I mean, I was in Scotland and I went to oh gosh, what was the castle? There's a castle on the west coast, so big, it's like Versailles, and it was funded entirely from the dispossession of my ancestors. The clearing of the Highlands funded that. And I'm in the store and I'm talking to this 18-year-old, poor thing. She's working the till, and I asked her, I said, do you have any books on the Highland clearances? Knowing that they won't, almost certainly. But her response was so telling, because her response indicated to me that not only did they not have those books, but she actually had no idea what I was talking about. This is a Scottish girl who knows nothing about the clearances in her own. So, you can be a part of a demographic and not understand the history of it.
Yeah.
And for so many people, they've been gaslit by the culture. And when you go to some gathering or workshop where you learn the bigger story and you start to wait a minute, maybe this anxiety and depression isn't mine. Maybe it comes from something else. It's so healing. And so how is it possible that both things seem to be true? They're both true because, responsibility isn't a fact to be established. It's a medicine to be dispensed. And that's the job of elders in any community, is to see what medicine when in what doses. And you could be in the same workshop if you're deft and agile enough, and one person gets you need to reflect on how this is you and how you created it. Another person gets honey, it's not your fault. But they're both, so this, just as an example, that we tend to think the truth is the truth is the truth. And it's just cross-cultural. But even the things like the golden rule, treat others as you'd like to be treated. There's lots of variations on that that people have been happy to do, which is great and beautiful. But it's also, how do you translate that in the moment, in your life, in the times you're living in? That's not always so easy. For example, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. That doesn't just mean people always sweet and nice. I've asked people this in workshops. I said, would you rather that people gossip behind your back, but they're nice to your face, or people just give it to you straight? Everybody wants it straight. Then I say, okay, how many of you give it to other people straight? no hands go up. So that's just hilarious. It has nothing to do with point of view marking, but that's a hilarious realization about being human. But the point is how we translate these things. The people overwhelmed with content and information and data and bits and bytes. That happened a long time ago. What they're wanting is that to be woven together into some sort of discernible pattern, some tapestry, some fabric, a tartan that is clear, that yarn is not just left tangled on the ground, it's woven into something. And that's our point of view. And so they come to us because there's something in that pattern, something in that design that speaks to them. But there's the wool and there's the weaving, but there's also the wearing of it. And so it has to be translated to their lives individually. But it also has to be translated to the times. You know, one of my dear friends, Lewis Cardinal, who's a indigenous fellow from where I live, a Cree fellow, and I think he was talking about maybe his uncle, but who'd studied with an elder, a medicine person. And the medicine person sat him down at one point. He said, I've taught you everything I know about the plants, all the different plants and what they heal and what they're good for. And you've learned that all extremely well. I've taught you the songs that go with some of the ceremonies that go with the plants, and you've learned the songs and the ceremonies very well, but there's a kind of ceremony I haven't taught you, which is all the ceremonies you're going to need to create and make up for the times that are coming. Because this idea that there's one set of ceremonies that never change in indigenous culture is not true. You're in a different time, and that ceremony may not fit, and you're going to have to adapt it, maybe make whole new ones up. So everything has to be adapted to where we are. And that's the point of view. And so that has to show up in our marketing. If your marketing hasn't changed in the last 2 years, it's missing the mark. It's not as relevant. People are noticing, because then, of course, it does seem like a cash grab. Just like, wow, these people don't give a shit about anything that's happening in the world. All they seem to care about is money, because that's all they talk about. And if you can't find how your work is relevant, and it probably is if you dig to what's happening in the world, and you can't build that bridge between your own point of view, your own hard-won wisdom, and what's happening in the world, it doesn't come across well, and you're missing the opportunity. Because for most people, you know, this happened, this was a year or so ago. Of course, the Black Lives Matter thing was ascendant, properly so. And finally, you know, the grief of the Black community was being heard, and it had its way with the people in my membership or mentorship program, as it should. A lot of them were undone, but of course, it lifted up questions: should I even be coaching as a white woman? Should maybe I should have more Black clients? Or maybe I should be referring them to Black coaches, or you know, maybe I should be teaching anti-racism. But then, of course, on all of those, there's the other side of it of, wait a minute, oh God, that's tokenization just to get Black clients. And and maybe a Black person wants to work with me. Maybe there's a reason, and so should I turn them away? And who am I to take their agency away? And you know, people's brains. And I was getting these messages from my members, their brains were seizing up. And I said, look, yeah, this is a particular moment. And so it's good to honor the moment for what it is. This is what's happening right now. And this is an issue that matters to me. I wrote a whole series of letters called Dear White Men, speaking to white men about how do we talk about these conversations of race on racism on Facebook in particular. I started a blog called Healing from Whiteness. I started a Facebook group of the same name, which is somebody else's. Anyways, I've thought a lot about it, and I probably still don't know very much, but it's been important to me. And so I said, look, this matters to me as an issue. And there are so many issues in the world. We can't take them all on. That's the reality. I think it's good to acknowledge what's happening, but there are there's the extermination of indigenous people and languages. There's the acidification of the oceans. There's the just wholesale destruction of forests around the world. There's abuse and addiction and there's just so many things in the world, and not everything will be our issue to be the one that we speak to, number one. And that's not saying all lives matter, in the pejorative way, the dismissive way. But it's also, I invited them to say, can you look at your work, the understanding of anti-racism, at least my understanding of where it came from, is just saying it's not enough just to say I'm not racist. It's just there are institutions that have come from a history of racism, and they're still around, and they still privilege people, with lighter skin tones and white people. And can we acknowledge that and work against it? And this is, again, that's not just racism. There's in different countries around the world, there's different kinds of prejudice where you get systems built up, and those systems marginalize specific people. So I said, can you look in your work? Is there anything in your work that's about undoing systems that have been around a long time, internally and externally, that marginalize people or the world or parts of ourselves? Because if you're doing that work, you may call it something different, but it's still a part of that bigger movement for justice, whether it's a justice inside ourselves or inside our communities. And in some communities, it's going to be Black people. In other communities, it may be Asian people. In this community, it may be, who knows? And it'll change over time, which is good to stay supple, because you can get locked into this is the oppression. But one of the major skills, of course, of the oppressors, of the elite, has always been, besides divide and conquer, has always been shifting and changing and adapting, co-opting movements that used to be radical and turning them into something mainstream and completely defanged, declawed, neutered. So it's just good to stay supple on it, and to look at our work and to try to draw the connections. Say, okay, what is my work at a deepest level really about? And does that relate to what's happening in the world? And if not, that's something to notice and reconsider a bit. But also, and if it does, how? And how can I build the bridge for the people who are attending to my marketing and following me? How can I help them see that this nonviolent communication I'm talking about has something to say about what's happening in Ukraine, that has something to say about racism, that the yoga that I teach has something to say about the way that communities are being torn apart? And if we can speak from that place, from who we are, not who we're not. I can't speak for Black people. Wouldn't be proper for me to do so. I can't speak for, indigenous people beyond the ones I come from. But we can speak from our place, we can speak from the point of view, and we can try to offer it up as something useful, as some sort of medicine for the times that we see. And if we do that, the marketing, even just self-servingly, it just becomes more relevant, it becomes more interesting. People, we're so, the biggest challenge is not that people are just in pain in their personal lives, it's that people don't know why they're in pain. And the challenge with the situation in the world, it's not just that it's crazy, it's that people can't get a grip on the crazy. Like, what is happening? Why is it spinning out? People don't see the source of it. And if you can, in some way, lay down some context for people of like, here's at least a piece of why it's spinning out, at the micro and the macro level. This is something beautiful. And your work may be more at the micro level. But here's the other thing I would say is, I think it's important for all of us to consider also, are there things we can be doing beyond our business for the world? This could be involvement in a nonprofit. It could be starting a charity. It could be doing fundraising for, existing efforts. It could be donating money. So there are real tangible things that we can, and we can also use our social media platforms for these things. you can be raising awareness about the issues that matter to you. And again, there's plenty to pick from. There are so many issues, and if you can help people see how the issue you care about is connected to other issues in the world, that's wonderful too. Anyways, that's what comes to me in response.
I love
to
that.
question.
It feels, I love the way you've kind of like navigated us back to, I guess, like a deeper truth. I think that particularly when times are uncertain and scary, it can orientate us kind of like more externally and kind of away from what's really for us. And I love where you've kind of navigated it. It's like, not every battle is our battle, not every cause is our cause. But I think the more we're coming from like what is really deeply aligned to us, that likely is going to be the place that we're going to be able to bring the most love, do the most good, speak most from truth that other people can connect to. So yeah, I love that. So we've not really touched yet upon the topic that we planned to talk about, but I think that was so rich and so timely. I'm really glad that we began there. So coming to what I heard or what I saw when I reached out to you and said, hey, should we jump on and do an episode around the way that you see niches and this idea of kind of creating almost like a limitation to create within. What occurs to you as being I guess linking from what we just talked about, and I can also see, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this, would you see also where the territory is changing, the way that our point of view is going to kind of weave around it? What does that then mean in terms of our niches? And I think first and foremost, because I think you've got a particularly wonderful way of just naming niches. So perhaps let's start there before we start to sort of join any more dots. I'd love to just hear your sense of niches, the importance of niches. What do you even mean when you're talking about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been talking about niching the whole time. That's without saying it, we've been saying it. The way I define niching that makes the most sense to me is it's the role in the community or in the marketplace that you want to be known for. So it often gets taken as just target market and who you're trying to reach. I just think there's more to it. And
I just stop you there. The first time I read you, I read you saying that rather than heard you saying it. The first time I read you saying that, it was like all these like lights went on in my mind, just like, oh my goodness, yes, this isn't some just like, like, oh, this is a powerful way to market or you'll sell more. And it was just like, suddenly it's just like, oh my goodness, like that gives it context. This feels true. And so I just want to say, like, the way you talk about that, I think is just so fabulous. I'll let you go on now, but I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. So we all have a certain role in our communities and in the marketplace, and we're not for everybody. We can't do everything. I mean, it's a real human thing just to testify to how heartbreaking it is to be human, to see so much pain and to be able to do so little about it. And we just can't. We wish we could. But there are these very hard limits of our capacity, of our understanding, of our position, the privileges we have. It goes so far, and no farther. And you can push yourself to just crater yourself in a pit of ashes and burnout, and the world will still be a mess, which some of us discover the hard way. So there's limits there. And the limits of the world and the limits of our life, they don't confine us, they just define us. It's not a trap, it's not a dungeon. It's those limits are the shape of our lives and our work. One of the easiest, one of the surest ways I found, particularly for people who are coaches or in the healing arts, or in the service providing world in some ways is, and I got this from Jeffrey Van Dyke, he said, our deepest wounds are often the surest doorway to our truest niche.
Yes. Yeah.
The places we've been hurt and struggled, or seen other people hurt, or this is often gives the direction of our work and our lives. People get scared about niching because, oh, I'm going to lose out on something, but they're scared of the process, but they're never scared of the niche when it arrives. When it finally lands, the most common thing I hear is like, well, is a sort of like, oh my God, it could be this. People start weeping sometimes when they see what their real role could be, because I think the reason we resist niching is we imagine we're going to be given a role that won't suit us, that's going to ask us to do a bunch of stuff we don't actually want to do, help people we don't want to help, and feel in that way trapped and constrained. And it makes sense, growing up in the society we do, that we have that fear, because that's been most of our experience in life.
Yes.
We're being put in roles that don't suit us. You're an introverted kid, but your parents want you to be an extrovert. You grew up wanting to be an artist, but they want you to be a doctor, or you want to be a doctor, but they want you to be an artist. And so we're constantly shoehorned into these somebody else's shoes that don't fit us, that cut our feet, and etc. This has been most of the shape of our lives, is the shape of other people. I can't remember who said it, but I think it was maybe Jung who said this: the strongest influence on the life of the child is the unlived life of the parent.
Yes, that's a Jung quote, one of my favorite, one of those haunting quotes, isn't it?
Especially, I imagine, if once you have kids.
Yes. It's also, the thing I love about that quote is also really powerful in terms of like a permission giving to live our lives as parents.
Yes. Yeah. Amen. Well said. So yeah, so we've been hurt in various ways, and when people start to see, this way I was hurt, I don't want to see other people hurt this way, this could give some direction. This is just a doorway in, and so that's a limit, but it's so liberating, it's so freeing when people finally realize, oh my goodness, I could help those kinds of people. One example I often give, because it was so striking, I was talking with a woman who did Ayurvedic nutrition and healing. And she was so stuck with her niche, which she just only thought of as target market. But it's like, I could work with professional women who, maybe because she thought they could pay. And she had a number of these that when I heard them, they just fell so flat because I didn't see the connection at all. And finally, I asked the question I probably should have asked her immediately, which was just, what got you started on this? And she said, oh, because I had fibromyalgia very badly, and it really, ruined my life. I couldn't do anything. And I tried everything. I tried the drugs. I tried this alternative treatment, that one. None of them worked until I did the Ayurveda, and then I'm fine now. It's completely cured. I just have nothing. I'm healthy. And I looked at it, it's just like, it had never occurred to her that she could focus on helping people with fibromyalgia. And she was almost weeping with it, of, oh my God, I could help. And because she realized she could help, because she'd been through that and she knew something about it. She actually had some credibility. She could do something that would be useful for these people. And of course, she'll have an easy time writing a sales letter. I did a video a while ago called Marketing is Memory. And I just said, if you're doing it properly, especially if you're in the healing arts or a life coach, writing a sales letter is you're writing a love letter to who you used to be.
Oh yeah, I love that.
And so you're choosing a limit, but limitations are freeing. If you want to just completely confuse and constrict an artist, you say, make me anything, any medium on any topic. It's so baffling. But if you say the theme is heartbreak, here are the 3 colors you have, and here's the medium you'll be, the type of canvas and the size, that liberates them, because now they have some there's a book called Improvisation in Life and Art by a fellow whose name I wish I could remember, a red book. You can find it on Amazon, and but he makes this point, has a whole chapter on this about the importance of limits in art. If you're going to be making art, you've got to embrace the limits. In improv, I did improv comedy for 25 years. The hardest scene is the scene.
I didn't know that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. With one of the best improv companies in the world, Rapid Fire Theater in Edmonton. Yeah. But the hardest scenes are the ones where people go in and just don't name where they are. So there's an old improv game where you walk up and it's two people, you're in a line and you keep switching up, and you go, "Hey there, Frank," and the person, you name the other person. The other person says, "Hey there, Bob, good to see you here at the cemetery." And the other person says, "Yes, let's go dig up some bodies." I don't, but you say something related to the space. So you're both named, you know where you are, and then you've picked something to do. So in 3 lines, you've got the limitations that you need. And then, in improv, we also talk about this idea of you stay in the circle. So if the scene is about an enchanted forest, there's a lot of things that fit in that circle. There's a magic castle, there's a nook and a tree that elves live in, there's magic, there's swords, there's knights and dragons, that all fits. But aliens don't. An alien UFO is outside of the circle. And so you're willing as an improviser to accept the limits. Not just accept them, man, be so grateful for them, because now you know the boundaries of what you can do. And so it's the same thing in your marketing. You say, okay, I help these kinds of people with these problems. I come from this point of view. And there's 6 limitations to think about. It's the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Those are the limitations. Because you can't reach everybody. Like with the who, it's going to be limited in some way anyways. What you do, you don't do everything. How do you do it? You have a certain style, a certain way of doing it. You don't do it in every way. Where you do it sometimes is the limit. I work in this neighborhood. When you do it, time zones are a thing. I mean, I'm sorry, but even if you're going to be online, no matter, as I've learned in my membership, no matter when you schedule the calls, somebody can't make it. So, when you do it, just the timing you choose means Australia can't make it. And so you won't get a lot
This
of
is a really hard one for me.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm constantly having to choose between my favorite children, whether we serve our Australian people or our American people. So yeah, this is a particularly sad one.
Yeah. And then there's why you do it. There's the bigger cause, that, the bigger purpose of your work. And there's a lot of bigger purposes to choose. So it's not even, So in those 6 things, it's worthwhile and part of it is choosing limitations, but it's also just seeing what are the limits that are already there.
Yeah.
What kind of life have you had? What are you good at already? And then you work within that, and that may expand and shift over time. But so, there are certain limits, but then people say, oh, I'm going to get pigeonholed. And here's what I would say to you. You wish, man, you should be so lucky to get pigeonholed. You should be so lucky to get known for one thing and have that not change. That would make your life easier. Your marketing would be dramatically simpler. You would hit the kind of hot level of marketing where you are just burning so incandescently in a certain community, and everybody knows where you are and who you are and what you do, and it's all word of mouth, and you don't have to do anything for marketing. That would be what happened if you got pigeonholed. You should be so lucky. But here's what thwarts that. Number 1, you will change. You'll grow and shift. And that means you're going to be playing a different role, because you're not who you were 5 years ago. And number 2, the marketplace will change. The environment will change. Things will happen in the world that will make potentially what you do utterly irrelevant. Ask, blockbuster movies or various industries that have vanished and are completely irrelevant. So these things change. And if you don't change and adapt, once you change and the environment changes, your business will be irrelevant and wooden and hollow, and of no use to anyone in particular. Your marketing will be very difficult. So there is this constant, business is such a conversation with the world. you're trying to see what's happening in the world, and then what's happening in me, and then your business is the place where they meet.
Yeah, I love that. There's a couple of things that really stood out to me from what you've just said. One of them was one of the reluctances that people have to niching is they feel like I'm going to get trapped doing something I don't want to do, or doing it with people I don't want to do it with. And when you said, I get, oh wow, yeah, and the truth is, when it really is your niche, it's the opposite. These are people that you would love to serve. This is work you would love to do. And so it's so interesting how the fear is actually the opposite of the reality when we really are doing the work we came here to do. The other thing that I really heard, and it's definitely been my experience, is when we're willing to kind of start where we are, like serve the niche that we are here to serve now, my experience is that kind of like you notice that moves with you, and so the niche sort of alters and changes, but only because you've been willing to serve what's there now. I've really noticed that's been such an organic change, but it wouldn't have happened had we been kind of kicking and screaming against the one that was there for us at the start.
Beautiful. Yeah, exactly. As the world changes, you need to make new maps. As the world changes, you need to re-find your place in it. And the way we do that is by being present in the world. The two places people get stuck on their niching, one is people, they do a lot of stuff in the world, but they never reflect on it. Like, is it working? Is it helping people? Does it feel good? They just picked a niche, or it got picked for them, and they just do it, and they never change. And so they didn't have 20 years of experience. They had 1 year of experience 20 times over. The second place people get stuck is in here. And I see this a lot. People that, well, once I got my niche totally clear, then I'll do something. But it's by doing something, you can get it to 70% clear in your head, but the rest, you get a general direction. That's like, go, start walking. The road signs that seem unreadable in the distance will be readable, but you have to start walking. Your telescope is only going to let you see so far. You've got to start moving before you see, and then you'll find the next direction and the next direction. So then you just start small. You start, this is the importance of little beta tests and pilot programs, where people think, oh God, I have to get married to my niche, but you can date your niche. You can check it out in tiny ways and say, I'm just going to do a workshop in my living room. I'm going to do a 90-minute call. I'm going to have a series of 10 conversations with people on this topic. I'm going to host a Facebook group. Whatever, you can do very tiny, agile, inexpensive things. There's that book called Lean Startup, and he talks about what's the minimum viable product. Like, what's the smallest, not the biggest thing, but what's the smallest possible thing you can put out into the marketplace, just to see, do you like working with these people? Do you like this kind of work? Is what you do useful to these people? And the first one probably won't work in the way you'd hope, but it works wonderfully in terms of you learning and getting feedback. I mean, the first marketing workshop I ever did was terrible. It wasn't that great. First things I've ever done, it's just rough. I went to a friend's workshop. She was doing a workshop on, she was an herbalist and doing a workshop on things related to that. And afterwards we talked about it, and she's like, tried to put in way too much. I was like, yeah, that's the nature of the first workshop. You usually are trying to do 3 workshops, but nobody can tell you that. I mean, you just have to do it and see for yourself. And then next time you only do the 1 workshop. And so it's 10 times better than the last one was, because it's less overwhelming. And then from that, and by the 10th workshop, you've got something workable. You do that same workshop 100 times. It's incredible. It's a work of art at that point. But yeah, it starts by starting. There's that old poem, that beautiful bit of writing by, it's attributed to Goethe, but it was actually somebody else. But it's the, until one is committed, there's hesitancy, always the chance to draw back, and effectiveness, that piece. But it's interesting in Latin, the verb, because people think that means white knuckling it, commitment. Like you just, you're tenacious, you just don't give up. but the word commit, it's Latin roots. It's actually, I mean, it's just a verb and it means to begin.
Oh, wow.
And so if you reread that
Mm,
piece, replacing the word commitment with begin, it takes on an entirely different meaning, uh, which has nothing to do with raw willpower. And just, if you just start, magic
yeah.
things start to happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Oh, I love that. I got chills then. I think there's just something so loving and graceful about that.
Well, and this is, when I think about niching, this figuring out our role. And by the way, I mean, I did a video recently called Niching is Unnatural, and to try to make the case that it's unnatural in that you shouldn't be the one determining your niche.
Mm,
That should be determined for you by the village and by the elders. That
yeah.
the elders in a real functional community would have been paying attention to your whole life.
Hmm.
And when they named you, and you were brought into the fold of maybe the hunters, it would have been the thing your heart was yearning for the whole
Yeah.
time. It would have been the thing probably you most wanted. The name they gave you wouldn't be some aspirational name of, we hope he lives up to this. It would have been a name of, this is how we see you move in the world. It would have been a blessing, a affirmation, a benediction of who you already are. But it's left to us. So this is just an incredibly unnatural, stressful arrangement to be trying to figure out our own role. And it's where we are. But once you figure it out, this is your way of kissing the world on the forehead, because you're doing the thing that only you can do. You're playing this role that only you can play. And responding to what's happening in your community in a real way. Because if a niche is, this is where niches get into trouble also, is the abstract. I support and facilitate the transformation of paradigms through, at the cellular level, through these energy waves, whatever. And people just have no idea what you're talking about. And it's abstract versus when a niche is, one of my favorite questions to ask that help people figure out their niche is, what's the perfect moment for you to show up in your client's life? Like, what's the breaking point? What's actually happening in their real life that makes your work relevant? Because when we write our sales materials or marketing materials, etc., people should be able to read it and see themselves in it. The purpose of the headline is so that your ideal client would read it and say, oh my God, that's me. And the purpose of the point of view is you're making sense of the confusion of their days, because it's so baffling being a human being. It's, again, it's hard enough to be in pain. What makes it unbearable is that you don't know why you're in pain. And so
Mm,
our point of view that we share, it should make sense of it in some ways. We've got these three kind of levels of filtering, which has a lot to do with niching of the relevance, credibility, and value. And relevance is where you say, here's what's missing in the marketplace.
yeah.
It's one of the best questions for niching is, what's missing? What's nobody doing? That, because the fact that you notice it and you care probably says it's for you to do, because other people
Mm,
genuinely don't notice it. And the ones that do don't care that much. So the first question is just, what's missing? Nobody's doing this. There's no childcare in this neighborhood. My God, that's missing. We need that. So what's missing? The point of view that is this credibility piece, which is what's missing in people's approach to it.
mm,
What's not there in somebody's approach. And then the value piece with the offer is, how can you create something they just wouldn't want to miss out on? How can you create something that's so good that's, oh man, I don't want to miss that. That's perfect for me and where I'm at. But isn't it, it's an extraordinary thing when life taps you on the shoulder and says, this thing that you see missing in the world, it's like there's a puzzle and there's a piece missing, and it's so glaring to you. And wouldn't you know it, you're the exact size and shape of that hole. And that's for you to do. And it's so important because that hole, it's like a black hole, and it's sucking so much life out. We're seeing species go extinct. We're seeing languages go extinct through that hole, and who knows where they go on the other side. And so this can be part of the niche, is that you start to plug at least one more hole so that the fabric of life isn't completely rendered on your watch.
Wow, I feel like you've just navigated us to a really beautiful close. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, Tad, it turns out you had a plenty to say on the thing you said you weren't sure you had much to say about at the start. That was fabulous. Thank you so much. So where should people find out about you and your work, and I guess specifically about the themes that we've been talking about today?
Probably the best place to check out would be, well, my website, marketingforhippies.com. There's a starter kit that is pretty obvious where it is. And that has the full footage of my day-long workshop where I go into a lot of these themes in more detail, and there's some other bonuses with it. But also there's a page, marketingforhippies.com/steps. And then people can find, there's a series of steps. Like the first one is kind of the marketing 101, the ethics side. How do you make it feel good? Step 2 is niche. Step 3 is point of view. So you can delve very deep. I've got all my content organized pretty well there on, what these things are, why they matter, examples of them, how to do it. So those are probably the best places.
Brilliant, thank you. And as it's probably clear from what I said at the start, I'm such a fan of what you do. I think it really is an example of something that needs to be done, and you were the perfect person to do it. And I've recommended your ebooks to so many people, and I think on the face of it, it can seem as though it's quite a lot of money for a book. But what I've said to everyone that said that is more of a course. It's more of a kind of taking you through the steps to do the thing. And so if you're going to compare it to anything, compare it to either struggling along without it, paying someone to do it, or doing the course is my sense of the value that's in those books. I just wanted to say that because having the point of view book, I think I've referred to and re-referred to countless times over the years. So yeah, really just rave about your work constantly, and this is a great opportunity for me to do so again. Thank you so much, Tad. Thank you so much.